Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely incredible modern historical thriller. We are talking about an archaeological find that completely reshaped our understanding of biblical history. And the story of its discovery is just packed with espionage, open warfare, secret identities, and ancient mysteries. I am talking, of course, about the Dead Sea Scrolls. These texts contain the oldest surviving copies of biblical manuscripts, fundamentally altering what we know about religious history and our shared past. So we're going to trace exactly how these ancient texts were lost, how they were found, and the totally dramatic race to secure them.
So let's just dive right in. $100. Or, if we're using the currency of the time, 24 pounds. That is the exact amount initially paid for what is widely considered the greatest archaeological find of the entire 20th century. We're talking nearly 1,000 fragments of ancient manuscripts, including complete scrolls of the Bible and sectarian literature, right from the turn of the era. And that very first batch of these priceless artifacts, bought from a group of Bedouins for basically the cost of a nice dinner out today. How does something so monumental start so incredibly humbly?
Well, that brings us to Chapter 1, Discovery in the Desert.
To figure that out, we actually need to head back to the original, almost entirely accidental inciting incident that kicked this whole thing off in 1947, right in the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Judean wilderness. Picture this. Two Bedouin boys are out looking for a lost sheep near the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. One of them idly tosses a rock into a cave. But instead of that dull thud of stone hitting stone, he hears the unmistakable sound of shattering pottery. Naturally, they go inside, probably hoping for hidden gold or silver coins. Instead, they find several tall clay jars with lids. They reach in and pull out something way less shiny than gold, a green-looking, moldy, rolled-up leather scroll.
And this detail right here brilliantly illustrates the sheer absurdity of this discovery. These boys didn't immediately know they were holding a monumental piece of human history. Before being sold, one of these priceless 2,000-year-old manuscripts was literally hung on a tent peg outside a Bedouin tent. It just sat there, braving a harsh Palestinian winter, waiting for someone to take it up to Bethlehem to be appraised. I mean, it could have hung there for months.
But here's the thing. This wasn't actually the first time the desert tried to give up its secrets. Let's look at some earlier clues and near misses.
If we travel back to the late 1800s, a scholar named Solomon Schechter discovered a text fragment in a repository, a geniza, at a synagogue in Old Cairo. It was all about an extinct Jewish sect called the Sons of Zadok. Fast forward, and a copy of that exact same text was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. History was definitely trying to tell us something. And even more tragically, in 1884, a Jerusalem antiquities dealer named Moses Shapira claimed to have found ancient leather manuscript strips from east of the Dead Sea. While scholars in England completely dismissed them as a forgery, Shapiro was so distraught by his ruined reputation that he tragically committed suicide. And the crazy part? Today, some scholars actually believe those strips might have been completely authentic.
History was basically leaving breadcrumbs everywhere. Back in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Christian leaders reported ancient manuscripts found in a jar near Jericho. Then in 950 AD, a Karaite scholar wrote about a Jewish group called the Cave People and their hidden books. Even as recently as the 1930s, local Bedouins offered workers at the Dead Sea Potash Works the chance to see caves containing books from the time of your kings. So the desert was clearly an ancient hiding place. People just hadn't quite connected the dots yet.
But once those dots finally were connected, the narrative tension completely skyrockets. It was a literal race for the scrolls.
You have to remember, 1947 was not a peaceful time for archaeological study. This was a time of massive upheaval and open warfare in the region between Jews and Arabs. The British were frantically trying to keep order behind barbed wire and fortified kiosks. To give you an idea of the sheer peril these scholars faced, consider the pioneering Jewish archaeologist Eliezer Sukenik. On the very day the UN voted for the partition of Palestine, he decided he absolutely had to travel to Bethlehem to secure 3 of these newly discovered scrolls. His son, who was a pre-state army general, begged him not to go, warning him he could be killed. But Sukenik, just dressed in Arab garb, braved the extreme danger and successfully bought the scrolls for Hebrew University. Meanwhile, 4 other scrolls ended up in the hands of an Armenian priest, Metropolitan Samuel, who brought them to the American school in Jerusalem. A young student there named John Trever realized exactly what they were and knew he had to document them before they fell apart. So he literally dodged bullets running through war-torn Jerusalem trying to find camera film. He could only find outdated, expired film, but he took it anyway, set up a makeshift lab, and began frantically photographing the delicate texts, column by painstaking column.
And this quiet, monumental moment of preservation sits in such stark contrast to the chaotic, dangerous narrative outside. You have John Trevor leaning over a makeshift table, preserving a 2,000-year-old scroll. And thank goodness he did. Since their discovery, many of the original scrolls have darkened and deteriorated. Trevor's photographs from that day actually remain some of the best, most legible versions of the text we have today.
But the drama wasn't over. That priest, Metropolitan Samuel, eventually brought his 4 scrolls over to the United States, and believe it or not, unable to find a buyer, he placed an actual ad right in the Wall Street Journal in 1954, casually suggesting ancient, priceless biblical manuscripts would make an ideal gift. The Israeli government spotted the ad and wanted them back immediately, so they sent an operative using the alias Mr. Green, who was actually a Jewish scholar named Harry Orlinsky. Orlinsky secretly authenticated the scrolls in New York, famously joking about whether he was being brought in for a dangerous military raid, and successfully purchased them to fly them back to Israel.
Which kicks off our next phase, the archaeological scramble.
With the original 7 scrolls secured, we move right into the aftermath of the 1948 war. The region was now literally split by new borders, sparking a wild, unprecedented archaeological race. And there were 2 starkly different realities on either side of that border. On the southern side, Israel controlled the wilderness. Hearing reports of looters sneaking across the border, the Israelis launched heavily armed, military-backed systematic surveys of every single canyon, using helicopters and logistical support to meticulously search for artifacts. But on the northern, Jordanian side, where the original cave actually was, totally different story.
Over there, an underfunded Jordanian and French expedition had to step in. The lead archaeologists, Lancaster Harding, Joseph Millick, and Roland DeVoe, faced an incredible, almost comical struggle. They would dig at the Khirbet Qumran ruins by day, trying to properly document history, but as soon as they went home for dinner, local Bedouins, some of whom actually worked on the dig during the day, would head out into the caves by night to systematically loot the exact same sites. The archaeologists were constantly finding looted caves, with manuscript fragments just magically showing up later on the antiquities market with zero historical context.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the secrets of Qumran.
So after all the gunfire, the secret purchases, and the midnight looting, we come to the final reveal. We have to answer the ultimate mystery. Where did these incredible scrolls actually come from? Let's take a look at Khirbet Qumran, the ruins located right near the caves. When archaeologists finally excavated it, they realized this wasn't just some random cluster of rocks. No, it was a highly organized settlement equipped with an elaborate system of dams and round cisterns designed to catch and divert winter rainwater. This brilliant engineering allowed the inhabitants to survive and thrive in one of the harshest deserts on Earth, ensuring they had enough water for drinking and for their mandatory ritual bathing.
The excavations gave us a really strict timeline. Qumran actually started way back in the 8th century BC as a fortified border post, but jumped forward to roughly 125 BC and the ruins were reoccupied and expanded by a dissident Jewish religious sect. They built meeting halls and workshops. They even survived a massive earthquake in 31 BC. You can literally still see the cracks in the ritual baths today. But their ultimate end came in AD 68. The formidable Roman 10th Legion was marching down the Jordan Valley, and the site was rapidly abandoned.
And that brings us to a really haunting final question. As the Roman army approached in AD 68, the occupants of Qumran took their absolute most precious possessions, their sacred scrolls, and hurriedly hid them in the nearby caves. And then, they vanished from history. Were they slaughtered by the 10th Legion? Were they captured and sent into slavery? We simply don't know their fate. But because of their desperate final act, preserving their library in those clay jars, their voices survived 2,000 years in the dark, just waiting to be found. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What exactly is written in those texts that was worth dying for? Well, we will have to explore the actual contents of the scrolls next time. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.